A while back, I did a video on the modal ontological argument. Actually, I did two videos, and I'll leave the links to those in the box below. Now, the modal ontological argument, like all ontological arguments, says that there are properties of God such that God must exist. Particularly, the modal argument says that the property of God of maximal greatness. He is a maximally great being. He has all the great qualities and none of the not great qualities. The argument says that a being such as that, who has maximal greatness, is a necessarily existent being, such that if it is possible for them to exist at all, if they exist in some possible world, then because they are necessary, a necessary being, they must exist in all possible worlds, including the actual world, this one. And of course, the argument, which was given by Plantinga, said that it is possible for God to exist, and because of this, God must therefore exist. Now, in my videos, I talked about the fact that even if we assume that God is a necessary being, you can't just assume that it is possible for God to exist. The argument really leads to one of two outcomes. Either it is possible for God to exist, God does exist in some possible world, and therefore he does exist in our world, or it is impossible for God to exist. Just that the idea that God's attributes are necessary does not guarantee that God does exist if God is otherwise impossible. One of the arguments which attempts to show that God is possible, I came across recently on a blog called Rocket Philosophy. This is the blog of YouTube user Sinkh, and I'll be leaving a link to that in the box below also. This argument was put forward by Robert Modal, and the blog entry here is entitled Robert Modal's Modal Perfection Argument, the Possibility Premise. And I think his argument doesn't work. So let's take a look at this argument. First, it covers great-making properties, and the article says that properties that are better to have than to not have. Knowledge is plausibly a great-making property as opposed to ignorance, etc. So certain properties of things are great-making properties. Now, having all great-making properties is considered maximal greatness. And maximal greatness itself is a property. As explained in the article, it says maximal greatness, abbreviated M, is itself a great-making property because if you didn't have M before and you acquired it, you would be greater than what you were. If you didn't have all the great making properties before, and now suddenly you do, you have maximal greatness, then you are greater than what you were. So maximal greatness, M, is itself a great making property. Now, the opposite of that, non-maximal greatness, is therefore a lesser making property according to the article. If you didn't, and it is abbreviated as not M. If you didn't have not M before and you acquired it, you would become less great than what you were. Not M, of course, is simply the negation of M. You are either maximally great or you are not maximally great. And one more thing before we actually get to the argument. The article says, a great making property cannot entail a lesser making property. If it did, then it would no longer be, by definition, a great making property. And because of this, M, the maximal greatness property, cannot logically entail not M, or non-maximal greatness. And that seems to make sense, right? I mean, if you're maximally great, then that obviously cannot entail non-maximal greatness. Okay, so given that, here's the argument. And before I point out the flaw, let me see if you can spot it. It was kind of strange because as I was reading the argument and trying to figure out what's going on, it fairly quickly hit me. And I thought, this absolutely can't be right. But let's see if anyone else out there notices it. The argument goes like this. Number one, if M is not possible, then all properties entail not M. Number two, M cannot logically entail not M. Number three, therefore, M is possible. Now, this form of argument is argument by contradiction. It's often used in mathematics. Basically, in order to prove that something is true, first you assume that it is not true, and then you work from there until you hit a logical contradiction. And that's what this argument does. It starts out by assuming that the property M, maximal greatness, is not possible, works through, finds an apparent logical contradiction that that M would have to therefore entail not M, which it can't, and therefore what we assumed, that M was not possible, can't be true, therefore M is possible. So where is the error in this? Now, I'm not 100% sure of this. I might be wrong, and if I am, I would appreciate if one of you viewers out here, including Martin himself, Sinkh, would explain this to me. But it seems to me that the problem here is in premise number one. And again, that is, if M is not possible, then all properties entail not M. In particular, the part where it says, then all properties. All properties, really? Including M, which we already said was not possible? It seems to me that the error is here that we automatically don't include impossible properties in the reasoning anyway. I mean, when we say then all properties entail M, don't we mean that set of all properties that are possible properties? All of the properties left once you eliminate all the crazy, logically contradictory or otherwise impossible properties? All the rest of the properties would entail not M. So, the fact that M cannot logically entail not M, as is given in premise number 2, doesn't really seem to be the stumbling block that they're trying to make it out to be. All the properties left after you eliminate the impossible would logically entail not M. So, I guess that is my crazy reading of this argument. When it says, then all properties entail not M, that it is restricting itself to only all those properties that are left which are possible properties. To give a better example of what I mean, let's assume some crazy property. We're going to call it C for crazy. Now, this crazy property is not M, but we're going to define it in such a way to say that it cannot entail not M. Why? I don't know. Again, this is probably an impossible property that doesn't make any logical sense. But that's the point. So if property C is supposed to be considered along with all other impossible properties in premise number 1, then that automatically falsifies premise number 1, because we would have a case where M is not possible, but all properties still don't entail not M because of C, because we define C as a property that cannot entail not M. But is that really a possible property? Of course not. So in order for premise 1 to work in the first place, we got to eliminate all that crazy, nonsensical, impossible stuff. We must limit that phrasing, all properties. We must limit that to the subset of all properties which are possible. But if we do that, then we can't get the conclusion in 3, because since we've already said M is not possible in premise 1, then M cannot cause us any trouble to get the conclusion in 3. So it would seem here that we have a problem of You can't have it both ways. Either in premise 1 we're talking only about all possible properties, and we're cutting out all those crazy self-contradictory other properties, or we're including all the impossible properties, but then premise 1 can't be true anyway because of a property like C, which I already spoke of. Either way, I think this argument is busted. And if it's busted, that definitely weakens the support for the premise that God, a maximally great being, is possible. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Thanks.